Ava had never been good at speaking in groups. Even as a child, her voice always seemed too soft, her hands too unsure. But here, in this circle of folding chairs and flickering fluorescent lights, she was trying. Week after week, she showed up, not to be heard but to heal. Group therapy wasn't glamorous. It was messy, raw, and often silent. Sometimes people cried. Sometimes they didn't speak at all. But every Tuesday at 6 p.m., Ava sat in the same chair by the coffee cart, clutching her leather-bound journal like a life raft. And across from her, always directly across, sat Natalie. Natalie, with her bright smile and air of effortless authority. Natalie, who walked into rooms like she was doing them a favor. Natalie, who'd been Ava's best friend since high school. They'd survived bad boyfriends, college dorms, and cross-country moves together. If trust had a face, Ava thought, it looked like Natalie. "I'm just here to support Ava," Natalie had said on their first group session. "I don't need therapy, but I believe in showing up for your people." Everyone admired that. Ava had admired it too. She didn't notice how Natalie always steered the conversation. Or how, when Ava spoke about her childhood or her panic attacks or the sleepless nights after her breakup, Natalie's hand tightened just slightly on her own knee. Not until later, that Tuesday. Ava had shared something she hadn't told anyone, not even Natalie. Not even in all the years of late-night phone calls and wine-soaked weekends. "My therapist says I don't know the difference between loyalty and fear," she'd said, voice shaking. "That maybe I cling to people who hurt me because I'm scared of being alone." There had been silence, then a soft hum of support. Natalie had smiled gently and squeezed Ava's knee. "That's brave," she said. Later that night, Ava sat cross-legged on her couch, journal open. Her thoughts poured out in messy loops and jagged lines. Words she hadn't dared say out loud. Words like shame, envy, rage. Words she barely admitted to herself. And when Natalie came over with her usual bottle of Merlot and box of pastries, Ava hesitated, then she handed over the journal. "Just the last few pages," she said. "I don't know why, but I want you to read them," Natalie blinked. "Are you sure?" Ava nodded. "I trust you." Natalie took the journal like it was a delicate secret, which it was, and began reading. Her eyes flicked quickly over the words. No reaction. Just the occasional and a half smile. When she closed the book, she looked at Ava with an unreadable expression. "You write like a writer," she said finally. "It's beautiful," Ava blushed. "It's just journaling." "No," Natalie said, her tone heavier than usual. "It's real." They sat in silence for a while, sipping wine. Ava felt lighter. Like maybe vulnerability wasn't something to fear. Like maybe she wasn't broken, just bruised. But as Natalie left that night, hugging Ava a little too tightly, smiling a little too widely, there was something off. Something just beneath the surface. A flicker in her eyes that didn't quite match her voice. Ava didn't notice it then. Didn't question why Natalie didn't return the journal. Didn't ask why her texts grew slower, shorter, vaguer over the next few days. She just thought maybe Natalie was busy, or tired, or being Natalie. Because when you've known someone for most of your life, you don't assume betrayal. You assume love. What Ava didn't know, what she couldn't yet imagine, was that the words she wrote in the quiet of her living room, words meant for healing, for honesty, for growth, had already left the safety of her hands. And Natalie? Natalie had other plans. Plans that started with a smile and ended with Ava's secrets in a stranger's hands. Ava had never been good at speaking in groups. Even as a child, her voice always seemed too soft, her hands too unsure. But here, in this circle of folding chairs and flickering fluorescent lights, she was trying. Week after week, she showed up, not to be heard, but to heal. Group therapy wasn't glamorous. It was messy, raw, and often silent. Sometimes people cried. Sometimes they didn't speak at all. But every Tuesday at 6 p.m., Ava sat in the same chair by the coffee cart, clutching her leather-bound journal like a life raft. And across from her, always directly across, sat Natalie. Natalie, with her bright smile and air of effortless authority. Natalie, who walked into rooms like she was doing them a favor. Natalie, who'd been Ava's best friend since high school. They'd survived bad boyfriends, college dorms, and cross-country moves together. If trust had a face, Ava thought, it looked like Natalie. "I'm just here to support Ava," Natalie had said on their first group session. I don't need therapy, but I believe in showing up for your people. Everyone admired that. Ava had admired it too. She didn't notice how Natalie always steered the conversation, or how, when Ava spoke about her childhood or her panic attacks or the sleepless nights after her breakup, Natalie's hand tightened just slightly on her own knee. Not until later, that Tuesday, Ava had shared something she hadn't told anyone, not even Natalie, not even in all the years of late-night phone calls and wine-soaked weekends. My therapist says I don't know the difference between loyalty and fear, she'd said, voice shaking. That maybe I cling to people who hurt me because I'm scared of being alone. There had been silence. Then a soft hum of support. Natalie had smiled gently and squeezed Ava's knee. That's brave, she said. Later that night, Ava sat cross-legged on her couch, journal open. Her thoughts poured out in messy loops and jagged lines, words she hadn't dared say out loud. Words like shame, envy, rage, words she barely admitted to herself. And when Natalie came over with her usual bottle of Merlot and box of pastries, Ava hesitated, then she handed over the journal. Just the last few pages, she said. I don't know why, but I want you to read them, Natalie blinked. Are you sure? Ava nodded. I trust you. Natalie took the journal like it was a delicate secret, which it was, and began reading. Her eyes flicked quickly over the words. No reaction, just the occasional and a half smile. When she closed the book, she looked at Ava with an unreadable expression. You write like a writer, she said finally. It's beautiful, Ava blushed. It's just journaling. No, Natalie said, her tone heavier than usual. It's real. They sat in silence for a while, sipping wine. Ava felt lighter. Like maybe vulnerability wasn't something to fear. Like maybe she wasn't broken, just bruised. But as Natalie left that night, hugging Ava a little too tightly, smiling a little too widely, there was something off. Something just beneath the surface. A flicker in her eyes that didn't quite match her voice. Ava didn't notice it then. Didn't question why Natalie didn't return the journal. Didn't ask why her texts grew slower, shorter, vaguer over the next few days. She just thought maybe Natalie was busy, or tired, or being Natalie. Because when you've known someone for most of your life, you don't assume betrayal. You assume love. What Ava didn't know, what she couldn't yet imagine, was that the words she wrote in the quiet of her living room, words meant for healing, for honesty, for growth, had already left the safety of her hands, and Natalie had other plans, plans that started with a smile and ended with Ava's secrets in a stranger's hands. The phone stopped buzzing, not suddenly, not in a dramatic overnight purge, but gradually. The way a tide pulls back, so slowly you don't notice until you're ankle-deep in sand, staring at an ocean that isn't coming back. No more group texts. No more memes. No more Sunday invites. Ava refreshed her apps, checked her phone settings, told herself they were just busy, but deep down she knew. She'd been blocked by Jonah, unfollowed by Sarah, left on read by Emily, and Natalie. Natalie had changed her profile picture. A smiling selfie. The caption read, "Protect your peace at all costs." Beneath it, Emily had commented, "You're glowing, babe." Jonah, "Surround yourself with the right people." Sarah had posted a story the next day, brunch with Natalie, all clinking glasses and high-pitched laughter. Ava watched it twice, just to be sure she hadn't imagined it. She hadn't. They had moved on. Without her. Around her. Because of her. The pain wasn't loud. It was dull, persistent, like walking on a sprained ankle. You could fake your way through it, but every step reminded you that something was broken. Worse than the betrayal was the silence. No. One asked for her side. No one asked if she was... Okay, Natalie had rewritten the narrative. Before Ava could even find the words. She's just going through something. She's been acting off for a while. She takes things so personally. She's not stable right now. The words made their way back to Ava. Through mutual friends, through screenshots, through pitying glances from people who used to know her coffee order. She cried in the shower, stopped answering texts from coworkers, let the dishes pile up, let herself unravel. By the time she walked back into therapy, 3 sessions later than scheduled, her eyes were hollow and her voice was a whisper. I feel like I don't exist anymore. she told her therapist. Her therapist? A soft-spoken woman named Mira folded her hands. You feel erased, she said gently. Ava nodded. They didn't even ask. They just picked her. Believed her. Do you blame them? Ava paused. No, I blame me. Mira tilted her head. Why? Because I let her read it. I gave her the pages. You gave her trust, Mira corrected. That's not a crime. That's a mirror. Ava looked down. Her fingers twisted in her lap. It feels like I'm disappearing. Then let's bring you back. How? Mira reached for a drawer, pulled out a plain, unlined notebook, slid it across the table. I want you to write again. Not to hide. To reclaim, Ava stared at it. What if it's not safe? Then don't write for safety, Mira said. Write for strength. That night, Ava sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by the chaos she hadn't had the energy to clean. Open mail, empty tea mugs, the cardigan she hadn't worn since brunch. She opened the notebook. The first page was blank, but not for long. She didn't write about Natalie. Not directly. Not yet. She wrote about quiet, and how sometimes it sounds like punishment. She wrote about shame, and how it attaches itself to silence like mold. She wrote about herself, not as a victim, but as a woman learning the language of boundaries. And when the pen stopped, when the ink ran dry, she flipped the page and started again. Over the next few weeks, she stayed off social media. She unsubscribed from the group's shared calendar. She deleted the screenshots, not out of forgiveness, but as an act of cleansing. She kept writing. Morning pages, late-night reflections, midday bursts of memory and rage and grief. She wrote with the messiest parts of her, and slowly, something shifted. The ache didn't go away, but it changed color. What was once bright and hot became cool and manageable. She no longer stared at the door waiting for someone to walk back through it. She stopped needing to be understood by the people who had misunderstood her on purpose. And on the first Saturday she woke up, without dreading the day, she made pancakes from scratch. With music playing low and the windows cracked open, later she opened her journal again. This time, she wrote something different. A betrayal doesn't break you. It shows you where the cracks already were. Now I get to decide how to rebuild. She underlined that line 3 times, and for the first time since the group chat fell silent, she smiled. Dear Shame, let's talk. No fancy formatting. No header image, just a plain white background and black text. Honest, minimal, brave. She didn't promote it. Didn't even add hashtags. But the words poured out like truth had been dammed up, waiting for release. She wrote about that moment, sitting across from a friend who once held her secrets like glass, and then shattered them without flinching. She wrote about the silence that followed. The icy distance of people who called themselves chosen family. She wrote about the ache of doubting her own narrative. The cruel trick of betrayal, that it makes you question not just others, but yourself. And at the end of the post, she signed it. Still healing, but louder now. Ava. Then she hit publish. She expected nothing. But she woke the next morning to 4 new emails. One was from a woman in Boston. Another in Johannesburg. One from someone who didn't sign their name at all, just wrote, I thought I was crazy for feeling this way. Thank you for naming it. Ava stared at the screen. These weren't comments. These were confessions from strangers who'd been gutted in similar ways. Friends who turned cold. Families who used secrets as weapons. Bosses who used softness as stepping stones. She wasn't alone, and neither were they. She posted again a week later. The day they stopped clapping. It wasn't about the brunch or Natalie. Not directly, it was about how quickly admiration turns into accusation when you stop performing for other people's comfort. It was about how certain circles don't want healing, they want hierarchy. And when she wrote, I wasn't fragile, I was finished pretending, the words rang like a bell through the inboxes of hundreds. This time, there were 8 messages, then 12, then 20. One woman wrote, Your words feel like I'm sitting across from a friend who actually sees me. Ava wept when she read that. Not out of sadness, out of recognition. That's what she had always wanted to be. Seen, not handled. The posts came weekly after that. She wrote in cafes, in her therapist's waiting room, in the quiet glow of 2 a.m. kitchen light. She didn't write as revenge. She wrote as rebellion, against silence, against shame, against the idea that vulnerability was something to regret. Her old therapy notes, the very pages Natalie leaked, became blueprints, not for revenge, for rebirth. She repurposed lines, expanded them, gave them context. Each essay a layered unraveling, soft, fierce, unapologetic. One of her most read pieces was titled, "She Called Me Sensitive." I called it a superpower. It went viral on Medium within a day. By the end of the week, it had been reshared on several mental health pages, quoted in Instagram carousels, and featured in a Voices to Watch list curated by a feminist publication. Still, Ava kept her name small. She didn't post selfies. No curated grids. Just words, raw, unfiltered, true. Natalie had no idea. She still posted selfies with captions like, "Healing isn't linear," vibes, and curated brunch photos with their old group. She still texted Ava's name in lowercase, like it was a curse or a punchline. What she didn't know was that Ava's words, the ones she dismissed, exposed and tried to crush, were now comforting thousands. That those words were finding their way into women's phones on nights they couldn't sleep. That Ava's pain had become a lighthouse for others caught in the same fog. Her therapist, Mira, noticed the change. "You're glowing differently," she said one afternoon. Ava smiled. "I think I stopped waiting for closure. I built a door instead. And where does it lead?" Ava paused, thought about it. "To something honest," she said. "Something that's mine." By month 3, she received a message from a small press. An editor had been reading her posts for weeks. "Would you ever consider compiling these into a collection?" The message read, "We think your voice could reach even farther." Ava didn't reply right away. Not because she was unsure, but because she wanted to sit with the moment, let it land. Because this wasn't about going viral, it wasn't even about healing anymore. It was about impact, and if her voice could be used as a soft weapon against shame, she was ready to swing. She opened her journal, wrote 3 words on the page, "This is mine." Then she opened her laptop and replied with one word, "Yes." It started with a message from Aaron, a name Ava hadn't seen in months. One of the few from their old group who hadn't picked sides out loud. The text read, "Hey, I don't want to stir things up, but I was wondering if you'd be open to a sit-down with Natalie. She's been saying she regrets how things went down. Maybe it'd be good to talk things out." Ava stared at it. Her thumbs hovered over the keyboard, then stopped. Not because she didn't have anything to say, but because she had already said it, loudly, clearly, just not to them. The truth was, she didn't need a conversation to feel peace anymore. She didn't need an apology wrapped in performance. She didn't need to be understood by the very people who refused to hear her when it mattered. She didn't respond. Instead, she opened her blog dashboard. A new milestone had appeared at the top of the screen. 100,012 subscribers. She blinked, let it land, then exhaled. Slowly, not out of shock, out of recognition. She wasn't waiting for closure. She was writing past it. The next post wasn't angry. It wasn't sharp or petty or even cathartic. It was something else entirely. It was titled, "To Every Woman Who Bit Her Tongue to Keep the Peace." It began, "You're not crazy for remembering what they forgot. You're not difficult for needing what they dismissed. You're not fragile. You were just unprotected. Then I was taught to be quiet, to be loved, to be agreeable, to be included, to let betrayal go unspoken or risk being seen as dramatic. But I'm done pretending silence is strength. Sometimes the loudest thing you can do is live." She didn't mention Natalie by name. She didn't need to. The women reading knew exactly who she was talking about, because they had their own versions of her. Different faces. Same fracture. The post was shared over 60,000 times in 48 hours. She received messages from therapists, educators, authors, mothers, teenagers. One simply said, "I didn't know I was allowed to outgrow people who hurt me until I read your words." Another, "This felt like a permission slip to stop explaining myself." Ava read each one, then filed them in a folder titled Real Connections. That same week, the email came from the publisher, a small but respected house that championed brave stories told with tenderness. The The subject line was simple. Your words belong on shelves. They offered a deal. Nothing extravagant. No flashing lights or bestseller promises, but it was sincere, fair, creative. Control stayed with her. The contract arrived in a PDF attachment. Ava didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't post a champagne emoji or a tweet that read, "Can't believe this is real." Instead, she opened the file, scrolled through the pages, and signed with calm hands and a clear heart. Then she made tea, sat by the window, and whispered to herself, "You did this." Without rage, without revenge. Just with truth. Aaron messaged again the next day. "Did you see my text?" Ava replied this time. Just one line. "I hope she finds peace." "But I already have mine. No anger, no bridge burning, just closure." For herself. That weekend, she lit a candle, opened her journal, and wrote the last entry in the section titled Wounds. She wrote, "You don't have to attend every battle you're invited to. You don't need the final word. Not everyone deserves a seat in your healing, and not every apology is worth waiting for." Then she turned the page, titled the new section, Beginnings. The working title sat bold at the top of her Google Doc, What She Knew About Me. It stared back like a mirror Ava had finally stopped avoiding. Each time she typed, her fingers trembled just a little, not from fear anymore. But focus, this wasn't a blog. Post-it, this was permanence, no more share buttons, no. More comforting anonymity of digital scrolls. This was going on shelves. This was going in hands. She didn't name Natalie, but the stories pulsed with her shadow. Chapter 1. Her smile was a warning. That's how it began. A recollection of a brunch years ago. How Natalie had leaned in, eyes glinting like sun off broken glass, and said, "You know, people only betray you with what you give them." At the time, Ava had laughed, mistaking it for wisdom. Now, she knew it was foreshadowing. The manuscript grew slowly. She revisited old essays, rearranged them, layered in connective tissue between the lines. The publisher offered gentle but direct feedback. "Can we lean more into the betrayal here?" What exactly was said in that confrontation? Did this really happen like this? Ava answered with clarity every time. "It's based on the truth, not gossip, not revenge truth." There was a difference, editing. Wasn't just about trimming words, it was about standing still in front of moments she had once sprinted past. The scene where she found her private words in the group chat. She rewrote it 6 times. Each time the grief reshaped itself. First, it was fury, then disbelief, then sadness. But by the final draft, it became clarity. She didn't betray me because I was weak. She betrayed me because I was real. And she wasn't ready for that. The hardest chapter to write was the one titled, The Night I Knew It Was Over. It described the exact moment Ava understood Natalie wasn't just careless, she was calculated. How, during a conversation after the leak, Natalie tilted her head and said, "Maybe you just felt exposed because you were never that strong to begin with." Ava had never repeated those words out loud, but now, she typed them, and then added, "I was strong enough to survive it, strong enough to write it down, strong enough to let the world see me bleed and still not fall apart," her editor called after reading that chapter. "I have chills," she said. Ava smiled faintly. "Me too, but they're the good kind now." As the final draft neared, Ava spent long hours at her desk. Tea cooled beside her, sticky notes framed her monitor. One in particular stood out. Written in her therapist's handwriting, "Vulnerability is not failure. It's evidence." She'd kept it through every move, every heartbreak, every breakthrough. Now it lived beside her dedication page. She wrote it in silence one afternoon, to the women who trusted someone and got burned, to the ones who journaled instead of screamed, to the soft hearts mistaken for open wounds. This is not your shame to carry. This is your story to own. By the time she sent the final manuscript to her publisher, Ava didn't feel nervous. She felt clean, emptied in the best way. There would be interviews, podcasts, press, questions, but she wasn't afraid of being seen anymore, because the person they would see was finally her, unmasked, unapologetic, unfinished, and still enough. Later that night, Marco peeked over her shoulder at her screen. "You ready?" he asked. She closed the document. "I've never been readier." He kissed her temple. "I'm proud of you." She smiled, not out of modesty, but out of recognition. because for the first time in her life, she was proud of her too. The book dropped on a Tuesday. No fanfare, no red carpet, just a quiet post on Ava's blog. It's here. I hope it finds you gently. She expected a few shares, maybe some DMs from longtime readers. What she got instead was wildfire. By Thursday, a TikTok creator read one of her lines. Aloud against moody piano music, some people mistake your silence for softness, until they learn it cuts deeper than their loudest. Scream, the video had 2 million views by nightfall. Comments flooded in. I feel seen. She just told my whole story. Who is this author? Ava watched the numbers climb like temperature on glass. She refreshed her inbox. 10 interview requests, 20 book club invites, a message from a Netflix scout. Would you ever consider adapting this? The sales tracker blinked again. Top 10 on Amazon, top 5 in memoirs, top 1 in women's studies. She blinked twice, then laughed, alone. On her couch, barefoot, tea forgotten beside her, because this wasn't revenge, it was resonance. Her wounds had turned into windows. By week 2, journalists began to call it a movement, the quiet fury of a generation. They praised the voice, unflinching yet lyrical. They dissected the themes, betrayal, resilience, reclamation, but what they all agreed on was that it felt personal, too personal, which is when the questions started. Is it about someone real? Did this friend know she was being written about? Is there a Natalie? Ava smiled whenever she heard the last one, because of course there was, but the power wasn't in naming her, it was in telling the truth, without ever needing to prove it. Mutual friends started to reach out. One sent a simple message. Page 83 broke me. Is that about what happened with, A former college roommate commented on a post. I always wondered what really went down. Now I think I know. Even old acquaintances slid into her DMs. Some were supportive, others awkwardly curious. Natalie? Silent. But the silence was loud. At a local bookstore signing, someone leaned across the table and whispered, "That part about the leak. I lived that. Different names. Same wound." Ava signed her copy with a quiet heart. This was no longer about one betrayal, it was about all of them. Behind the scenes, her publisher scrambled to keep up. Second print run. Third, international inquiries. Suddenly, Ava had a publicist, a travel schedule, a feature spread in Ava wore thrifted boots to the photo shoot. The stylist offered to change them out. She declined. "This is the version that got me here," she said. "Let's not rewrite her now." And still, Natalie said nothing. Didn't post, didn't call, didn't threaten, just disappeared from their shared group chats. Her profile photo vanishing like a closing curtain. But whispers filled the void. People knew. They always do. A few bold ones reached out on Natalie's behalf. One texted, "She's really hurt, Feels like you weaponized the past." Ava replied with only one line. "She taught me how." But not once did Ava say Natalie's name. Not in interviews, not in signings, not even in passing. Because when you've truly healed, you don't dig for applause, you simply stand, and people notice. At a book club panel, someone asked, "Do you regret writing it?" Ava paused, then answered, "I regret trusting someone who wasn't ready to hold my truth. But I'll never regret reclaiming it." Applause broke the silence. A standing ovation followed. She stepped down from the stage with no makeup touch-up, just grace. That night, alone in her hotel room, Ava scrolled through reviews. One caught her breath. "Every woman I know has a Natalie. This book isn't just cathartic, it's a blueprint." She screenshot it, added it to her folder. Quiet wins, then closed her laptop and sat still. Not overwhelmed, not anxious, just grounded, because for the first time, her story wasn't running from her. It was running ahead. Opening doors she didn't even know existed. And the woman who tried to silence her had accidentally given her the loudest voice of all. It started with an email, subject, "Can we talk?" No greeting. No punctuation. Just that Ava stared at the blinking subject line for a long time, didn't click it. Didn't delete it. Just let it sit there, like something expired in the back of the fridge. 2 days later, the DM came through, a new account. Natalie's name, but no profile picture. "I think we need to talk." This isn't fair. You made me look like a monster. Ava closed the app. This time she didn't even hesitate, because monsters never think they look like monsters. They just hate the mirrors. Then the voicemail, blocked number. Straight to voicemail. Ava listened once. Natalie's voice was a mixture of guilt, panic, and defensiveness. The cocktail of someone losing control of the version they once owned. I know you're mad, but you took it too far. You said you forgave me. I thought we were past this. How could you do this to me? Ava replayed the line in her head. Do this to me. Not I was wrong, just you hurt me back. She didn't respond. Didn't call a friend to rage. She just opened her suitcase, packed 2 more black dresses, a fresh journal, and the pen she always traveled with. Her book tour was about to begin. The first stop was Chicago. The line at the signing table snaked around the corner. Ava wore soft gray and red lipstick. Not to impress but to arrive. She signed book after book, each name handed to her on sticky notes. To Melanie. To Grace. To Liana. Every once in a while someone hesitated, then leaned close. Thank you. Your story saved mine. Ava smiled. That's why I wrote it. And she meant it. Every time. At a Q&A, someone asked, what do you say to the people who feel called out by your story? Ava answered simply, if the truth makes them uncomfortable, that's not my responsibility. My truth isn't revenge. It's release. The audience clapped. But one woman, sitting in the back, wiped tears from her eyes. The next day, a quote from her answer went viral again. Healing is not revenge. It's choosing your own peace louder than their denial. Natalie saw it. Ava knew she would, because silence is powerful, but success is louder. In another city, another hotel room, Ava lit a candle on the windowsill. Below, traffic buzzed. Above, clouds rolled by in soft defiance. She opened her journal, wrote 3 words. I feel free, not because Natalie was gone, but because Natalie no longer decided what stayed or what stuck. More messages came from readers, from survivors, from quiet women finally finding volume, but none from Ava, not to Natalie, not even a sigh, because this wasn't about a response. It was about non-response and the power in not letting a former villain back on stage. At a bookstore in Portland, a teenage girl clutched Ava's memoir to her chest. When it was her turn at the table, she whispered, my friend did the same thing. Told everyone I was depressed. Like it was gossip. You made me feel unembarrassed. Ava leaned forward. You were never the one who should have been embarrassed. Tears pooled in the girl's eyes. She nodded, and Ava signed. For the girl who never needed fixing. Just witnessing, a few days later, Ava got another email, this time from Natalie's personal account. Subject, I'm sorry, but the body of the message wasn't an apology. It was a PR cleanup, a desperate rewrite. Natalie wrote, you were always talented. I just didn't know how to handle your kind of vulnerability. I was jealous. That's not an excuse, but maybe one day we can talk again? Ava didn't flinch, didn't rage, she just smiled, the way you smile at a storm long past, and clicked archive. That night, she stood on another stage, the lights soft, the air charged. Behind her, a slide with her book title. In front of her, 100 women holding copies close like shields. She took a breath. This isn't a story about betrayal, she said. It's a story about becoming. About not letting someone else decide what's sacred. Nods filled the room. So did something heavier, relief, recognition, home. After the talk, one woman pulled her aside near the exit. Do you think people like her? Change. Ava thought about it, then answered honestly, maybe. But that's not why I wrote the book. The woman looked confused. Why did you? Ava smiled. To remind women that their silence isn't proof of guilt. And their truth deserves better than secrets. Natalie would keep trying. Ava knew she'd find ways to reappear, remind, reclaim, reframe, but Ava was done living inside. Natalie's sentences, she had her own paragraphs now, her own punctuation, her own permission. The tour continued, so did the notes, the hugs, the gasps, and Ava, steady, clear and fully herself that never looked back. Because when your story is finally yours, You don't waste time explaining it to the person who tried to erase it. You live it, louder. The invitation came on thick cardstock, cream with gold trim. You are cordially invited to speak at the annual Women Who Rise conference. Location, Oak Ridge Hall, downtown. Ava blinked at the address. Downtown, her hometown. The same city where Natalie leaked her words. The same city where Ava once hid in a cafe bathroom, heart pounding, after seeing friends scroll through her pain like it was tabloid gossip. Now, she was being asked to headline, not as a victim, but as proof. She RSVP'd yes without hesitation. Oak Ridge Hall smelled like floor polish and old applause. The last time Ava was here, she was in the audience, notebook in her lap, Natalie whispering in her ear, making fun of a speaker's outfit. She'd thought it was harmless, banter, bonding. Now she knew better, Natalie didn't just whisper about others. She collected weaknesses like confessions and saved them for later. But this time, Ava wasn't seated in the crowd. She was standing behind the stage curtain, mic clipped to her collar, cue cards in hand, not that she needed them. From backstage, she could hear the MC. Please welcome our keynote speaker, writer, survivor, and voice of a generation. Ava Monroe! Applause thundered. Ava stepped into the light. She wore midnight blue, hair tied back, heels low and stable. She didn't try to be dazzling. She just tried to be solid, and she was. The stage lights warmed her face. She scanned the audience, not for Natalie, but for herself, the version of her that once sat out there, thinking pain had to be quiet to be respected. She found that girl third row, left side, in another woman's eyes. Then she began. I used to write in a journal no one else saw, she said, voice calm. It was my quiet place, my space to fall apart without judgment. A few women nodded. I trusted someone with that journal once. A friend, she smiled as she read it. I thought it meant safety. I didn't know it meant exposure. A few gasps, Ava's voice didn't waver. That betrayal didn't just break trust. It broke the illusion that I needed someone's approval to speak. Now the nods were firmer. In the back of the room, Natalie sat frozen, hair darker now, dress modest, eyes unreadable. She hadn't RSVP'd. She wasn't a speaker. She was a shadow. And Ava? Ava didn't glance at her once. I wrote because I had to, Ava continued. Not to shame anyone, but to shrink shame's power. And in that process, I found something wild and rare. My voice didn't just free me. It freed others, murmurs rippled. The soft sound of women recognizing themselves in her story. I was told to be quiet. That private matters should stay private. But pain doesn't vanish in silence. It just festers. She stepped away from the podium slightly. And sometimes, the very person who tried to silence you becomes the reason 1,000 others begin to heal. The room gasped, and then it erupted. Applause roared through the hall, a standing ovation. Some women wiped their eyes. Some held hands. Natalie didn't move. Not a clap. Not a twitch. Just stillness. A statue watching her own legacy crumble. Backstage after the talk, Ava's publisher handed her a bottle of water and a wink. You just made 10,000 more fans. Ava smiled. But her mind was elsewhere. Not on Natalie, on the woman in the third row who'd mouthed thank you without ever standing up. The quiet ones. The ones who didn't need a spotlight, just permission. Natalie approached later, not directly, from the side. Through the cluster of guests. Hovering. Ava felt her there, like weather changing. She didn't turn, didn't offer acknowledgement. Natalie finally spoke. Soft. You didn't have to. Say all that. Ava looked at her. Once, calm, and said nothing. Just turned and hugged an older woman waiting behind her. Natalie was not her audience. Not anymore. Later that night, back in her hotel room, Ava sat by the window. The lights of her hometown twinkled like distant memories. She opened her journal, a fresh one this time. No locks, no fear, and she wrote, I didn't come here to settle a score. I came to remember that I always had the microphone. I just finally decided to use it on my own terms. She closed the journal. The applause still echoed in her bones. It was a Sunday morning. Rain tapped gently against the windows, and the world outside her apartment was a soft blur of gray and gold. Ava sat on the couch, wrapped in a knit blanket. her favorite mug cradled between her palms. Chamomile. Always chamomile on milestone days. She wasn't checking sales. She wasn't refreshing social media. She was just breathing. Marco appeared from the kitchen holding 2 slices of toasted sourdough. He wore pajama pants, a hoodie, and the same sleepy grin he always had before coffee. "You check your email yet?" he asked, sliding beside her. Ava raised an eyebrow. "Should I?" He shrugged, then nudged her laptop with a knuckle. "Might be a good day, too." She opened it slowly. The inbox lit up. Subject: "Congratulations, you're a New York Times bestseller." For a moment, Ava just stared at it. The words didn't register. They didn't need to. Marco leaned over, reading the line upside down. "Well, damn. You did it," Ava blinked. "I did." He lifted his coffee mug toward her. "To survival." She lifted her tea. "To authorship." The glasses clinked. There were no fireworks. No confetti. No viral livestream. Just the soft buzz of meaning settling. Deep in her chest, this wasn't a win because of Natalie, this was a win in spite of... Or she thought back to that first leaked line. The one that circulated through group chats and brunch whispers like spoiled fruit. "Sometimes I wish I didn't feel so much." Natalie had laughed at it, mocked her in front of the others. That sentence, once used to humiliate her, had been turned into merch, embroidered on tote bags, quoted in poetry circles. Inked into skin, one woman had messaged her, "That line saved my life." Ava had cried when she read that one, not from pain from power. The book hadn't been in attack. She hadn't used names. She hadn't sought revenge. She'd sought resonance, and she'd found it. In the quiet hearts of women who'd once silenced themselves to keep friendships intact, to keep the peace, to keep from being labeled dramatic, Ava's book had become their mirror. And now? It was their microphone, too. Marco flipped on the radio, jazz humming through the apartment. He walked past her, pressing a soft kiss to the top of her head. "You hungry?" "I could eat," he grinned. "Then I'll make that sweet potato hash you like." "You deserve something cozy today." As he moved into the kitchen, Ava watched him. The ease in his posture, the kindness in his eyes, the lack of games or layers, no manipulation, just presence. She didn't just survive betrayal. She redefined intimacy. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. She hesitated, then opened it. "Guess you got what you wanted. Congrats on the book." "This was never fair." Natalie. Ava stared at it for a long moment, then pressed block. Again. No response. No rage, just removal. She didn't need to fight anymore. Natalie had once tried to use Ava's pain for entertainment, but in the end, Ava used the truth to write herself free. Later that evening, a journalist emailed, "We're doing a feature, 5 authors who turned personal pain into power. Could we interview you? Also, curious, do you have a message for those who doubted you?" Ava smiled at the screen. She typed slowly, deliberately. "Tell them, thank you for the material." She hit send and let it go. That night she journaled, not from heartbreak, but from gratitude. She wrote, "I thought she stole my story, but really, she just gave it an opening. She tried to end my voice. Instead, she gave it a microphone." Outside, the rain had stopped. The streetlights flickered like applause. Inside, Marco set the table. 2 plates, no drama. No ghosts, just Ava. Her words, her name on a list that once felt unreachable. She poured more tea and smiled to herself. The story she thought might bury her had become the one that carried her.